Welcome, welcome, welcome to the School of Radiance podcast, the place to be to both look and feel your best. In today's episode, we are going to be diving into everything you need to know in regards to your home and mold, because mold is sort of one of those sneaky things in your environment that can lead to inflammation, issues with sleep, issues with skin, and we have a mold expert here on the show who's been on the show before. And let me tell you a little bit about Brian Karr. He's a second generation indoor environmental consultant, specializes in assisting hypersensitive individuals with complex medical conditions by identifying and addressing mold mycotoxins and indoor indoor pathogens in their homes, leading to significant improvements in their overall health. As the co-founder of We Inspect and the Dust Test, that's actually kind of cute, the Dutch test, but the Dust Test, Brian has become a recognized authority on indoor environmental mold and biotoxin issues for medical professionals worldwide, having assisted over 10,000 hypersensitive individuals in creating healthier living environments. Beyond his consulting role, Brian is dedicated to education within the environmental and health industries and among consumers. He accomplishes this through speaking engagements at international health conferences and industry training symposiums. Additionally, Brian democratizes knowledge through his popular podcast, Mold Finders Radio, and comprehensive training programs that empower both consumers and health practitioners to properly navigate mold and biotoxin issues, which I have personal experience with. So I'm really excited to have Brian Karr here on the show. How are you today? And of course, what is radiance to you?
I am great. Thanks for having me. I didn't realize how long that bio was. So thanks for everyone for sitting through it. No, I'm great. I'm excited to be here. I like this question. What is radiance to you question? When I actually see it as like a visual, like if I think of something radiating, there's this kind of origin point, and then you see kind of like light coming off of this thing. And it's like, okay, so then what does that mean? Right. And like, if I was going to put something to that, I would say like whatever your purpose or like your true you is, like if you're doing that, like you're maximizing your radiation out, right? Like that's what I feel that looks like. So I just think it's like being yourself, not trying to be somebody for somebody else, and trying to do good. Like that's what I think it is.
Perfect. Love it. I love to ask everybody here on the show because you engage with so many people. You're on the top podcasts in the world in relation to biohacking and health optimization. So you really have your finger on the pulse of what people do who are high performers. And then there's the regular people like myself and those tuning into the show who just really want to look and feel our best. So you mentioned the radiator.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about, for a moment, those of us who have furnaces or even HVAC in the home. When we're talking about, getting heat in our homes or air conditioning, what are some of the easy things that people can start to do, and maybe how you help people with cleaning up their furnaces, their heaters, their HVACs in their homes so that the air quality is better?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I could probably do an hour just on that. So I'll tighten it up. The thing is like your HVAC systems, whether it's your heater or your AC, it's, central, you have air coming in. Even if you have wall units, you're still pushing air into the space. It's the lungs of your house, right? Like I imagine, your house is like an ecosystem in its own right, and it acts and moves and interacts with itself really similarly to like what the human body does. The human body has connections to different parts. You have something going wrong in one place, it's going to show up somewhere else, and that happens in your house too. And just like in your body, you breathe, right? And you breathe in, and you have the lungs of your body, right? And it's the same thing with the house. And so, the thing about your HVAC systems, your heaters, whatever it is they're going to suck up everything that's going on in your house. So like an easy answer is address the rest of the house and you're protecting your HVAC system. Like that's one big, it's one like big thing. That's like a broad thing to say. But it is really important because HVAC systems, they get impacted in like one of two ways. One is that the system itself is a source of a mold problem, right? Generally, that happens because the system has some sort of malfunction or something, right? Like it's not draining water properly. It's in a place where there's more moisture kind of like accumulating in the system. And they're generally not supposed to do that. So I'd say the majority of systems that we see don't fall into that category. I'd probably say like 20 to 25% maybe of systems, you open it and you see mold growing in it. And if you do, it's obviously like a big problem, right? But the majority of systems don't get impacted that way. The majority of systems, they're pulling air in from all other places in the house. And you open the system and it looks like there's just a layer of dirt or dust in it, which is what the majority of them look like. And the problem is when you're like HVAC contractors come in who are not looking at a system in terms of health, they're looking at a system in terms of function, right? Like, is it heating your air? Is it cooling your air? What's the pressure going in and out of the system, right? So they look at that, they're like, oh yeah, it's normal, whatever. Is the air cold, right? Like that's kind of how they're looking at it. When we look at it, it's what's the composition of the particle moving through the system? What's it made up of? And is it healthy or not, right? Like that's how we look at it. And so if you know when pulling things in from other areas of the house will kind of collect in there, a lot of times I talk about an HVAC system as like a shadow source. I like made this phrase a while ago that I call shadow sources. So like there's some like sources that are easier to see with your eyes. There's other things that you can't really see, but they can still be really impactful. So I call those like shadow sources. And if you accumulate mold spores or particles, or even like mycotoxins, which are mold toxins, and the fragments of those break off and they get into your HVAC system, over time they'll build up and build up and build up to the point where your system is effectively cross-contaminated, and when you turn it on, it starts sending it out. So if we know that like cross-contamination particle is essentially the thing that's kind of the primary concern outside of your HVAC just functioning properly, then filtration on the front of that system is so important. And by having the right filtration on the front of the system, you can stop these really small particles from even getting in there in the first place. And the biggest like philosophical thing for me, for We Inspect in general, is you stop at source, as opposed to like letting the source do its thing and then trying to put some magic solution in to like clean up the impact of the source, right? Like it's much easier to just stop the source in the first place. And so in an HVAC system, that's putting a really high quality air filter on the front of the system. And by doing that, you can stop a lot of these particles from getting in there.
Mm-hmm. And regularly changing those filters is super key. So, in your experience, obviously, this show is all about both looking and feeling our best, and the skin absolutely is a visible reflection of what's happening internally. And when I've been exposed to, say, mold or forest fire smoke and just toxins in general, I'll usually start to see things shift in my skin, my eyes, my scalp, energy, sleep after about 2 weeks or so. What are some of your experiences with clients and some of the things that they're complaining of that maybe mold exposure has impacted, including skin, energy, and sleep, even if they're feeling like they're doing everything right?
It's a lot. And I think that a lot of times it's more difficult to put the connection together, because when mold impacts the body, it's not like, I had food poisoning and my stomach hurts, right? Like you can kind of connect the dots. It's very easy to do something like that. When you're talking about like an external environmental exposure that's coming in, you're triggering an immune response, right? And so when that happens, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the body. And at minimum, mold exposure is an immune response at minimum, right? So all mold is an allergen at its minimum. So you'll get some sort of response. For certain people, they're more sensitive for a variety of reasons, whether it's genetics that it doesn't allow them to detox effectively, or maybe they were exposed when they were younger, like as a kid or like an adolescent, and their body actually learned to be on more high alert and respond more aggressively, for lack of a better term, when it sees mold in the body. And so it like over responds. That's another thing that can happen. Or if you're kind of dealing with other health stuff and your immune system's kind of being taxed already, And then all of a sudden you add this other thing into it, and then it like overloads your system, right? So there's a lot of reasons why people would react, but you can imagine just with those three examples of types of people, how you can have one person in a place and they could have symptoms that are completely different, right? Because of how their body is reacting to it. So the thing that I like to kind of talk through with people is, we think upper respiratory stuff is like the thing that you normally think, right? And it's fair, right? Upper respiratory stuff is fair. I think like the majority of the people that we work with, it's something called multi-system, multi-symptom reactions. So you have multiple body systems, right? You have your neurological system, your nervous system, your hormones, your endocrine system, and all the other ones, right? There's, your respiratory, there's all these different symptoms or systems. And when you start noticing either in yourself or spread out amongst the different people in the house that there are symptoms happening across different systems of the bodies, that is a huge indicator that there's an environmental trigger. And a lot of times it's a water damage building or a mold thing that's going on. So, if you're talking like, respiratory, it's your sneezing, your coughing, like all that stuff, but it can get more significant. It could get more severe, right? So there's like levels of that. But then digestive system is your gut, right? So now you're talking bloating or nausea, or you get down into the more severe things and you get things like, small intestinal, or SIBO, like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or like candida overgrowth, or just dysbiosis in your gut in general. You just kind of go down each system, right? Your hormones are a really big component. So, on the female side of things, like there's connections in PCOS, reproductive health tied to exposures. You could thyroid, obviously, that component of it gets impacted as well. Skin for me was one of my things. So like my two was skin and neurological were my two. So the whole reason I got into this is because I had this big water issue in an apartment that I lived in. And I just happened to be dating my wife at the time. And her dad just happened to be like the leading expert in the world on this stuff. And so I just got lucky, basically, right? And he came in and saw I had all these things going on in my space. But this one particular water event it was a leak from the ceiling. It was a pipe leak in my ceiling. It was a pretty big leak. And so like if you can imagine like pouring water on like your kitchen island countertop or something, you pour water, it goes sideways, right? And then it gets to the island and then there's no more sideways. So then it goes down. So that's what happened in my room. So my whole ceiling, it went across my ceiling and got to my walls and it went down all my walls. And so while the landlord came in and cut a little hole in the ceiling and fixed the leak, I was sleeping in a toxic box for months because it was in all my walls. And so I started getting like less sharp, like mentally, like I could see that like I just wasn't as like on it as I normally was. And then I started getting, what looked like eczema type of breakouts on my face and things like that. And that's kind of what triggered me to have my future father-in-law come over and help me like work through all of it and figure it out. So it's a lot. So I'd say like if it's an individual where you're seeing multiple symptoms like that, let's just take me. I like cognitively I was slower and I was also seeing skin issues. They seemed completely unrelated, right? But they were incredibly directly related to one thing. And that's how the environmental mold piece triggers. So if you see it in one person, or you have, one person in the house is not sleeping as well. That's one, for example. The other person in the house, their hair is thinning. That's a weird thing. The other person in their house, they have like gut issues and they have bloat, and this person has this and this person has this. And you're like, how has everyone in this house got something going on that's like not even related to everything else? The initial thought process that happens is, well, it can't be the house because it's all different. That's the first thing that people will think. And the actuality is like, it can definitely be the house because everybody's reacting differently to something. And the consistency in what's happening is that they're all in the same place, breathing the same stuff. And then it's just manifesting differently.
Yeah. I 100% categorize air in my paper on oxidative stress status and its impacts on skin aging. Air is numero uno. Air, then water, lighting, electromagnetics, your food quality, then detoxing, yeast, fungi, mold, heavy metals, parasites. Air quality first and foremost. This is something that we engage with in our environment all day, every day, then, you can argue the other things, but air number one. So purification and also getting at it from the source. Fun fact, you can use night vision goggles to see if there is a temperature difference from water that could be a potential leak, and actually found this in a friend of mine's home when we were playing with some night vision goggles one night. A fun story. It's like, oh, there's a big leak there. We're not going to say who it is. Both Brian and I know who it is. And yeah, it was in this like dark patch in the ceiling, and then went all the way down the wall. And the remediation side of things is pretty significant. You're right. We're not going to get into that. But one of the things that I will share is having air purification throughout your home, different air purifiers. I have those in every single room. So my office, my bedroom, in my kitchen living area, super key. And also just keeping things really clean. So the surfaces throughout my home, I dust regularly, I vacuum regularly, and I keep the dishwasher super clean, the bathroom clean. I have these little water things that I'll put under my cabinets, so that if there were to be a water leak, it would make a sound and then I could
Yep.
fix that. One of the things that we didn't yet talk about that can happen when the body's under oxidative stress, and it's usually this one thing that kind of adds to the bucket, tips over, and then we get skin rashes and irritation. So if you're prone to eczema, psoriasis, it could be like emotional stressors, but it can also be environmental stressors. And just do everything you can throughout your daily life to reduce your exposure to mold and bad air. So in your home, keep it clean, keep your air purifiers running, clean your filters, things like that. But also when you're out in the world, say for example, I'm at a restaurant and I go and use the bathroom, oftentimes like the hallway in the restaurant, going to the bathroom, I'll kind of like smell something. Um, your nose is one of your best friends. So if you smell something and it's kind of like, oh, kind of like musty or just smells a little odd, you're probably getting some mold exposure. So that's why I think just caring for ourselves all day, every day. I have my sauna next to me. I'm in that thing like 3, 4 times a week. I love the use of carbon 60, for example, as a super potent antioxidant.
Mm-hmm.
But we were talking before recording, I had an experience with air quality with pollen, but it's going to be a similar kind of presentation around the eyes when you might be exposed to quite a bit of mold as well. And kind of here's what I did about it. Here's what I did with it. So one evening outside, this tree just dumped a ton of pollen and had like a really big show that I was on the following day. And I looked in the mirror as I was washing my face, and my eyes were puffy and red. I was like, oh no, this is not going to be good for being on camera the next day. So I pulled the air purifier into my room. I took my antioxidants before going to bed, ended up having a great sleep, and actually looked better the next day I woke up. So that's kind of something I'll do if I'm on the road or I'm noticing that there's some redness and puffiness around the eyes. And it happened really quick. I started to see that within about like a couple hours of exposure to pollen. And I think it would be really similar for mold too. So looking at ourselves in the mirror when we're washing our face and be like, how do I look today? Do I look great, or do I look like maybe I had some exposures to mold? Maybe you were in traveling or in someone's home or in an office space or even in a car where there can be mold. What are some of your favorite things to do, Brian, if say you've had a bit of an extra exposure and you're really good about this stuff in your home, to kind of get yourself back on track? Maybe what are some of the things that I did well and some of the things that you've seen help other people when they've had recent exposure?
Yeah, it's a good question. Part of it is prep, like having your body ready to have an exposure hit and not like completely fall apart to then have to rebuild it from scratch, but to kind of have this foundation of, hey, I can handle like a hit here or there, and sure, I might have like a small reaction, but I can handle it, right? And so there's a lot that goes to that. A big piece of it is mitochondrial health. A big piece of it is kind of consistent detoxing regularly. Like air quality is, I think, the biggest thing. There are other things. The reason that air quality is so big is actually, I forget who it was, but one of the doctors that was on my show recently was talking about this. They're saying it's the only thing. So you got water, you got food, you got air, right? These are kind of like the three main things that happen. It's the only thing that can impact your body from two different systems. So you breathe, it gets into your lungs, it can impact you through your lungs. When you breathe, you're also breathing like into your sinus cavity and all that stuff, and you get postnasal drip that goes into your gut, and you have direct impact to your gut. So you're actually getting dual system direct impact, and then you can have impact then coming out from your lungs into your body or into your gut that can create dysbiosis there, or via leaky gut can be pushing itself out, right? So you've got like two different ways that it gets to you. So it's really important to have like a resilient foundation to start from. A lot of that is on it's stuff that's not like rocket science. A lot of people who are like who are actively aware of being healthier, right? It's the types of food that you eat. It's not drinking. It's it's being hydrated well. It's having air filtration and purification in your house, so the air that you are breathing isn't constantly working against you, right? Like say like every breath you take either hurts you or serves you. It's one of the two things. Like you don't just breathe and nothing happens, right? So like you're either breathing and it's like a negative, or you're breathing and it's like, hey, like this, I'm breathing healthy air and you're getting the benefits of breathing, right? So it's like one of those two things. You take 20,000 breaths a day. It's like the volume of an entire swimming pool in your backyard that you're breathing every single day. So like if the air that you're breathing, imagine looking at your crystal clear pool in the backyard, and then it's full of toxins and stuff. And I tell you have to go drink all of that water today. Like that's what happens when you're in a house that has these things that are going on. So every breath, if you're able to reduce as much as you can, that's why a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, where you're talking about like dust reduction and air filtration, it's not that like cleaning the house solves the mold problem, right? Like to dig into that a little more, the reason that like the dust management and that is so important is because when most mold is hidden. So like if you're in a house, you're not going to see mold growing on all the walls. You're not going to smell it because most mold is not actively growing right now. And the only reason you would smell mold is if it's actively feeding and growing and it puts off a gas. It's like its digestive gas process, right? So if it's not actively eating or growing, which happens because most water issues in houses that we go into are not currently active. So when we go into a place, we use infrared cameras, which is similar to the night vision stuff, right? It's temperature differential. We'll use moisture meters. That's all important. But I would say probably 80 to 90% of the hidden mold problems we find in homes are not actively wet. So you're not going to trigger a moisture meter, and an infrared camera is not going to show anything. So then it's like, okay, how do you figure out where that is? And it's understanding that while moisture is required and the precursor for mold growth, it doesn't need to be there for mold to stay. It just needs to be there for mold to grow. So think of like a flower. You plant the seed, you water the flower grows, you stop watering the flower doesn't just like vanish into nothingness and float away, right? The flower stays there, it gets dry, it starts to fold over, the leaves start to break apart, the petals get all dry, they flake apart. That's what happens to mold. And so when you have something, and a lot of people will do this, like, oh, we had this issue, we had it fixed. We had the garbage disposal under the sink cabinet leaked one time. So, it got the sink cabinet wet, but we fixed the garbage disposal and the cabinet's not wet anymore, which is all fair and true, right? But if mold grew when it was wet, then it will still be there, like underneath the cabinet. And then as it desecrates and gets drier and it breaks apart, like that flower that we just talked about, it gets into the living space, and that's how it gets airborne in our house. So it's not that like we stick our face behind a wall and that's how we're exposed to mold, but that's where it comes from. That's the source of it. And when it moves into the airspace, it's going to do one of two things, which is, we talked about one earlier, which is the HVAC system. Once it gets in the airspace, it's either going to pull in the HVAC system, or the second thing is gravity is going to bring it down to the surfaces. So when you talk about like cleaning surfaces and dust buildup, the dirt and the dust is going to harbor the mold particles and spores and toxins, and that's what's going to be there, right? And so if you're cleaning that and removing it, there's less of it to pop up into your face and less of it for you to breathe. There's this concept called the human cloud effect. And basically what it says, like, as you walk through any building, every step that you take, every movement that you do, you're disturbing settlement. So like, I'm in my chair. If I plop down in my chair, I'm going to pop all the settled particle up into my face. If I open the window shades behind me, I'm going to disturb particle that's settled on the window shades. And so what it basically says is that we are constantly popping suspended particle into our breathing zone, and we are the disturbance that's doing it. So you can't stop it. Like, I can't not walk. Like, I could fly, I guess, which would be cool, but I can't do that yet. So if we know that that's the thing, then you can do some things and reduce it. So you're talking about like, well, how do I help prepare myself for something like that? Less exposure consistently allows your body to breathe a little bit more, to not be on high alert all the time, to be more in your parasympathetic state than your sympathetic state, right? So those are big things. And the other thing is like, continuously doing detox efforts in some way. Air isn't the only thing, right? It's all these other things. It's chemicals, and it's this and it's that, and it's all that stuff. So like, whether you want to be more aggressive and you're doing more like binder protocols and stuff, or you want to be a little more kind of naturopathic and you're doing like herbal stuff and different things like that for helping to detox, all of those things are really helpful to get your detox pathways open and functioning properly, and then to also be removing toxins from the body. So if you do get hit with something, it's not like your body's like overloaded at the time.
Gotcha. I would love to hear your thoughts on public pools and steam rooms, because I've gone into a couple and people are like, oh, the health benefits of steaming and things like that. And I go in there and I'm like, this thing smells rank. This has to be like the number one incubator of mold that people are electively putting themselves into. So personally, I'm not a fan of public saunas and public steam rooms. But what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a really big fan of public saunas either. I won't go into a steam room. You can't pay me to walk into a steam room. Like we just said, like, mold needs water to grow. And so what you're doing is just pumping water into this room, not steam, right? So like, just to clarify, like, water isn't always a leak, right? Water is humidity. Water is elevated moisture in the air, right? And if you're just constantly pumping it into this space, then in a steam room, you have like, wood seats to sit on, and you have the sides of the steam room and all this stuff. You have all these places where mold can start growing in there, right? Like, I never in a million years would I be walking into a steam room. Now, dry saunas are way better because you don't have all that moisture pumping in, but you got to think when you're in a sauna, it's also why I don't love going into public, even if they're dry saunas, is the body becomes the water source. Like, your body is the water source, and every other person's body that was in there before you is a water source. You're sweating when you're in there. That's water. And so there's so many saunas that I've seen, so many people have like personal saunas in their homes now. You mentioned yours, I have mine too. There's a lot of people have them. And we look in all of them. Like, we inspect inside the saunas too, because you are the leak in the sauna. And if you're not being really diligent about protecting the surfaces in the sauna from your water that's coming out of you, then you effectively are creating water issues in your sauna. And you could have mold issues in there. And we've tested some of them, and some of them are really bad. And the thing with saunas is, when you're in there, they're great for detoxing. They open up your pathways, like, really good, but they're opening up your pathways like it's a two-way road, And so if you're opening yourself up, but then you're in a space that has an elevated, trigger, toxin issue or mold issue or whatever, also kind of working its way back at the same time. And it could have, detrimental effects in that case too. So it's really important, like, if you are using saunas, specifically dry ones, like, please don't ever go into a steam sauna. But if you're doing dry ones, and if it's your own, like, you're layering towels where your butt sits, you're layering towels on the floor where your feet go. If you lean back, get a towel behind your back so you're not letting that moisture get into the wood and stuff in there. And then when you get out of there, I see a lot of people do that, but then they leave the towels in there. Like, don't leave the towels in there. They're wet, right? And so then they're just sitting. So you got to take the towels out. and then like dry any areas where maybe some water worked through a tile. A towel, there might be a little drop or something somewhere. Just like dry those out real quick.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you just said. And this kind of comes down to, okay, maybe you're doing something socially, you're going for a swim, going for a workout, and then people who you're with are like, I want to go for steam, I want to go for sauna. Like, no, I don't do shared steam rooms. Like, number one, you're sitting on gross tiles that other people are sitting on too. And you're not taking a towel into a steam room because that would just be kind of weird.
Yeah.
You don't have a towel with you in the sauna because you've just gone for a swim. Anyways, I'm not a fan either. I have to say, and Sunlight is not paying me to say this, but their solo unit that I have right next to me, I
Mm-hmm.
think is the bee's knees, because you have these cushions that you lay on and then you have this dome over you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes with just really easy to remove and put back on and clean, kind of like built in cushion towel covers. And I also think it's one of the more affordable sauna units out there. So huge shout out to Sunlight, and I'm sure you're a fan of them too. You can find them on the biohacking page, my biohacking page at theschoolofradiance.com, because people are always looking for affordable options. And I think the Solo Sunlight unit is a really good one because you can actually keep it clean. And full transparency, they wanted to send me like a $20,000 sauna. I'm like, well, what can like regular people actually afford? Is like the solo one is great. You can lie down in it. You can clean it really easily as well. But yes, there are more expensive, fancier options are
You would
great.
have ended up with that one that holds like 6 people.
Totally.
That
Yeah, they
that
wanted
you're
to
like
send me that
doing
one.
yoga in while you're doing hot yoga in the sauna. Like that's the one
Yeah.
store they were gonna send you.
And I
I
was
mean,
really grateful for it. But it's like, what is something, especially for people who rent and maybe don't own, that
mm,
they don't have to get an electrician in to do the higher voltage outlet? Because that's one thing I ran into. And I was living in Florida for a while and obviously having to change those HVAC filters every single month,
yeah.
dealing with a hurricane water leak directly down the HVAC vent itself,
Hmm.
which was just terrible. It was time to go, clearly. Um, but I'm really grateful that you talked about that with what's actually happening in the public steam room and sauna spaces. I don't think people really know enough about that.
Can I just add one thing about infrared saunas, which is what the sunlight is? Like, forget the mold stuff. Like, there's so much research about how incredibly beneficial sauna. Like, if you had to pick one thing, like you get to do one biohacking, it's the only thing you get to do. I would be picking sauna. Like, that would be it. That's the thing. Like, there's research on its net reduction of all cause mortality, which don't fully quote me on it, but it was somewhere like 60% like reduction in all cause mortality. When you start talking about like Alzheimer's reduction, it's like massive reduction for like, potential future cognitive decline. And there's all these, so all cause is like heart disease, or like there's like three big things. I forget what they all are. It's literally the thing that just everybody dies of one of these three things. It like cancer, all of that stuff is so effective against that stuff. Like if there's one thing to like do every day, like it's you do that for 20 minutes and it's just like such a huge like long-term benefit for anybody. Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because that was actually going to be one of my questions for you is, how do environmental toxins like mold disrupt the body's ability to detox and recover and perform at its best? And for me personally, I'm hitting the gym. I'm lifting heavy. It's like
Mm-hmm.
to failure,
Mm-hmm.
uh, probably about 5, 6 days a week. And the only way I can do that is because I keep that oxidative stress status bucket as empty as possible through, clean air all the time. And I'm in the sauna. Usually after a session, I'll eat some food in the sauna, which is kind of hilarious, and then go to bed as part of, my wind down. But tell us about what people experience when, say, they have a mold exposure and they're just noticing they're not recovering well. Um, I'm just, because you've worked with so many people, that how environmental toxins like mold can really impact that ability to actually even detox. Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I preface this all saying I'm not a doctor, which I don't know if it's clear that I'm not, but I'm not. I just talk to a lot of them, and like the
Well, in all honesty, they probably come to you for information on this stuff.
well, on some stuff, yeah,
Yeah.
on some stuff, fairly. I, there are certain people who are just very impacted. And it's really clear, right? Then you have, and for those people, it sucks to be that impacted, but at least you like have the connection and you're like, I know this, I'm going to, whatever their choice is, they're making a choice off of knowing, what's happening, right? There's just a much larger group of people that are impacted and they have no idea because the symptoms aren't like severe to the point where they're like actively like researching and trying to figure out how to solve their own problems, which people who are impacted by environmental things like this generally have to go figure that out by themselves because general medical practitioners is just not on the, it's not in the insurance checklist, right? There's not a pill for it. And so it makes it really hard. And a lot of times, the stories I hear from people, even the ones that are more sensitive, it took so long for them to even get someone to help them understand that this was something they should be considering, right? They've gone to so many doctors and the doctor's like, oh, there's nothing wrong. It's in your head. There's something wrong with you. I mean, it's just crazy the thing that people say to these people. So for them, at least they're getting some sort of like feedback like from their body that like something pretty significant is going on, and it's not what I think the majority of people fall into, which is like, oh, I'm getting older, or oh, I got some kid, I have kids and they tire you out, or
Perimenopause,
oh,
menopause,
yeah,
hormones.
there's just so many excuses that people have, and it's not their fault, it's not like they're making excuses, but there's so many like reasons that they attribute this stuff to that it makes them not actively search out what might be really going on, because we sort of normalize this thing as like as you get older you just get less healthy, less effective, right, less optimized, and that's just how it goes because I'm old and that's what happens. And it's like a lot of times that's happening because age gives your body more time to be exposed to things that makes your body not work as well, right? And for those types of people who aren't like incredibly sensitive, it's almost like a slow burn that starts to happen and they don't notice it, And so like, getting back to like, what does that look like? I mean, it could literally just look like I feel tired all the time, or I'm more tired than I used to be, or man, we're getting a lot of colds lately. Like everybody in the family just can't kick these colds for like a year. We've all had something like between me or this one or that one. And the next thing you know, now, if you're the parent of a young kid, you rationalize that by saying these kids go to school and they bring it all back. Yeah, the school, right? Which I've definitely said before, and there's some truth in it. But like at the same time, is that happening every single time? If it's happening consistently, throughout. And then, cognitive stuff. People are like, I'm not as sharp, I'm forgetting things, but I'm getting older, and that's what happens when you get older. Older now versus what it used to be back then is like a long time ago is very different. Like I'm 43. I feel like I'm 30. Like it's very different. Whereas, when I was a kid and you're 43, like that seems like really old, right? Everybody's smoking, everybody's doing all these things, right? It's like a whole different world back then, right? And so I would just kind of like try to take stock and be aware of these things that you have been normalizing more so, I would say. Like, oh, this isn't right, but it's just kind of how it is now. Like, try to sit down, like, really, like, just take 10 minutes. You know, take a long time. Just take 10 minutes and be like, what are some of the things I've been saying that to? And there's a reason that all that stuff happens. Like, this stuff doesn't just happen for no reason. Like, I'm getting older is not really a reason, especially if you're not, like 80, for some of these things to start happening. And so if you're starting to notice some of that stuff, you go to your doctor annually and you do your, hey, here's my blood work, right? Because you're supposed to go check those boxes, and the blood work comes back, says everything's fine, because it's not the right type of test to look for this type of thing, right? So blood work says you're fine. But the concept of like, I'm going to do a screening to see if anything is wrong, that's a concept that everyone is familiar with, right? It's just, what are you screening for and how are you screening for it, right? So take that concept and apply it. We've just talked about like air and food and water are like these three big things. Like you could do that for air, right? You mentioned at the top, like I'm a part of the dust test. I was one of the founders of the dust test, and that's a screening test for your house. It's what it is, right? So it's like, it's no different than you going to the doctor and being like, hey, run all these blood panels and see if something's weird, right? And let's say they do, and they're like, oh, your white blood cells look weird. Well, what do you do then? They don't have the answer yet, but they have like the flag that's like, hey, we need to dig into this a little more. And then you start going down that road. The dust test is that for water damage, for mold specifically in your house, right? And if you do the dust test in your house, which is effectively, for anyone listening, you take a Swiffer cloth. I mean, it gets sent to you, but it's effectively a Swiffer cloth and a test kit that gets sent to you. Just like all these all these other at-home test kits that you do, like Biome and like all these other ones that'll have you like spit on this thing or do this or that. It's the same concept, right? It's a box, but in the box, there's what effectively looks like a Swiffer cloth. And it's, sterilized and it's all packaged well. But you basically take that and you just collect dust from throughout the house. We talked earlier about why dust is important and what it does, how it collects everything. You do that and you send it back in just like you would send any of these other at-home, body test kits in. And what comes back is an understanding of, is there a mold problem in this house? And if so, how significant is it? And, what can we do about it? That all comes back out of like the results that come with this. So like, I'd say like, if you're doing this inventory of yourself, you're like, oh, I have been a little more tired lately. Or, oh, we all do kind of have like something happening a lot, like throughout the year or whatever. Like just do this screening test, just do it for the house instead of your bodies and see, because you breathe, again, 20,000 times every day. It's either serving you or it's hurting you. It's doing one of the two things. Like figure out which one it's doing. And if it's not doing the positive one, then there's steps to take to shift that. And it can have a huge impact on your body.
Oh, I'm so excited you talked about your dust test. So for everybody tuning in, be sure to check out the show notes of this episode on how you can get your dust test. Again, test instead of guess. I'm so glad that you mentioned this. I think just the more data we have of the different strains that could be in the home and some of the symptoms that actually we could feel, even issues with sleeping, as we mentioned, but really vivid dreams, I think are really related to mold and also parasites. But share with everybody tuning in where they can find you, where they can get some more information, and also your podcast.
Yeah. So the dust test is thedusttest.com. So that's where that is. Super easy. Just like any other test kit, super easy to get. If you're kind of past that point, you're like, I'd really like this guy to come look at my house. It sounds like he knows what he's talking about. My inspection company is called We Inspect, and so we have our inspection team is set up throughout the country in different hubs, and we service the whole country. So we'd be able to work with anyone anywhere. Yes, weinspect.com. And if you're interested in inspection, what that looks like, there's a big yellow button on the homepage that says, book a free consult. We can talk through what that looks like in your situation, and if it even makes sense for you, right? Outside of that, I would say, Instagram is kind of my biggest spot on social platforms, videos every day, things. And then my podcast, pushing 200 episodes now on the podcast, Mole Finders Radio. So it's been going for a while. So yeah.
Yeah, we have a fun episode on there too, where I talked about the mold that I found in my hairbrush and my toothbrush. So make sure that those are clean as well. If you want great skin, everybody, if you want good energy, you need to pay very close attention to mold and doing the remediation if necessary, but really getting information. Like, is this something you need to worry about in where you're living? Or is it not? Like, are you pretty good? And I just think that having that data is super key, because I 100% believe that a lot of skin things can be resolved with reducing exposure to toxins in air, water, lighting, electromagnetics, foods, and all sorts of stuff. So always a pleasure to have you here on the show, Brian. This is your second time here. And everybody, get that dust test, super cute, like with the Dutch test, hormone test that we all do, and just get that information. Put your mind at ease that, okay, there could be some things in the home, or you're good, for just peace of mind for yourself and also for your family too. So do the best you can, test instead of guess. And I hope that you all got lots of great information, and now you have a great mold resource, trusted information here that lots of docs that I know and interview in the health space across North America, and a lot of them actually do rely on Brian for supporting their clients and different test kits to get to the root cause of what's going on. So no, this is not medical advice. This is educational information only. If you think you have a medical condition, you must seek the guidance of a licensed physician. Thanks so much, Brian, for being back on the show, and looking forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Have a good one, everyone.